as well as some new ones. So welcome, happy to have everybody with us today. My name is Georgina Donahue. I will be the host today. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we let some of our other friends dial in as they attend. We love seeing your faces, so if you want to turn your video on, we always encourage that. It's tons of fun to see where everybody is. Of course, if you don't have the bandwidth on your internet, or you're just sick and tired of having your video on, we totally understand that as well. One thing that also helps us when we are interacting in the chat is to make sure that your Zoom name is updated. So go ahead and if it's not, if it's a random number or something, hover over your name and rename yourself. And as we're just giving 1 or 2 more minutes to let other folks dial in, please go ahead and share your industry and your role in the chat right now. Mark, our expert guest, is going to use that information to really tailor the examples that he shares with you today. So let us know who's here, what industry are you in, and what's your role. Feel free to pop it in there. Oh, Sophie, hi, welcome, Sophie. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, a lot of familiar names on here today. Really glad to see everybody. So welcome. Oh, I see Chloe too. Hi. All right, we got supply chain, we've got fintech, we've got healthcare, SaaS, fintech, software, edtech, tech, software. So it looks like your guesses for who we were going to see today were right on. Got someone in medical devices, right up your alley, Mark. Let's see, SaaS, another medical devices. Oh, these are all your people and your friends, Mark. Oh, we're all going to have a really great time to get together today. So welcome, everybody. Really nice to see everyone. I am going to go right ahead and kick us off as everyone is sharing that information in the chat. If you've just joined us, please share your industry and your role so that Mark knows who's here and he can give you tailored examples and case studies throughout his presentation. So like I said, my name is Georgina Donahue. I'm the Director of Community here at Pragmatic Institute, and I'm incredibly pleased to introduce all of you to Mark, our expert guest. Mark Limacher is the founder and CEO of Innovis, which is a competitive intelligence firm, and they really specialize in pharma, medtech, digital health, and IT industries. So you're all going to love him. You're in the right spot. Mark is nearly a 30-year veteran in the area of competitive intelligence as well as counterintelligence. And, you know, he counts a nice collection of Fortune 100 companies as some of his loyal clients. So we're really excited to talk to him today. And he also delivers, private competitive intelligence seminars. He's a frequent lecturer on the subject, as well as counterintelligence topics at companies and also in academia. So we're really thrilled to have snagged some of his time and to be able to connect you with him today. So on this call, we're going to be discussing how you can really use Mark's many years of knowledge to stay ahead of your competition. And really using a proactive approach and an early warning system, right? So we'll talk through how you can systematically detect competitor behaviors, sales motions, customer pain points, and really allow you to anticipate market opportunities and your competitors' next moves. So, but first, I am going to let Mark share a little bit more about himself. He'll share just a little bit of personal background so you can get to know him better. And once he starts chatting, then you can all guess where his accent is from. You can put your guess in the chat and we will reveal where his accent is from and who won the little contest at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Mark, welcome. Thank you for joining us and take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Georgina, for this very kind introduction already. And it's nice meeting you all virtually in your respective ever so cozy home offices, most likely. in this new normal environment. This whole year has been beyond abnormal, as we all know. We have done a lot of medical conferences, the big ones like ASCO, ESMO, ASH, you name it, all virtual, which has been initially challenging early in the year, but now you develop very quickly best practices, how to get the most mileage out of event coverage. Same on the IT side, right? When you do the typical big IT events, it's all virtual, but you actually get more mileage out of those virtually, as we learned quickly, than you sometimes can do face-to-face. You just miss the socialization aspect. So what we do here today is in many ways very similar. So I try to keep it as personalized for you as possible. As Georgina said, whenever appropriate, throw in some case studies, since we specialize only in really two big buckets. One is healthcare, which also includes digital health, but also 12 therapy areas, as well as the classic IT space, from SaaS, cloud infrastructure, you name it. I'll show you later a bit more so you know who we even are and have some credibility, and having done this for almost 30 years now. So diving in, since we have a lot of territory to cover, I want to let you know, first of all, what the objectives are of our time together. The first one is very hands-on, really. We would like to share with you some tested and proven tools and processes that you can leverage instantly on a daily basis and apply them, hopefully, instantly next year, to proactively anticipate not only competitors' next moves, but it's also about market and product opportunities. So it's not all about threats or risk mitigation when we talk about competitive intelligence. It also has a lot to do with optimizing go-to-market strategies. It has to do with leveraging early embryonic opportunities that present themselves before someone else does, which would be your competition. And it also means identifying competitors' weaknesses that you can then apply in your go-to-market messaging, in your sales motions, and so forth for the reps. Related to this, we will go into how to develop a framework to prepare action plans for different types of risks. And I should even say not just risks, but also opportunities. So we're going to classify risks as they present themselves to you. And then lastly, we want to also share with you, again, best practices in how you can optimize the strategic impact of such competitive intelligence early warning systems, EWSs, as we call them, in your organization, also enhancing your own visibility of the CI or the product marketers function, but also your personal role, since you now all are working virtually, providing value, demonstrating value, and high impact deliverables really has become that more important than when you see each other day to day, every day in your offices with your colleagues and management. So those are the objectives. And if you boil these down to the ever so critical question, well, what's in it for me to attend this webinar? Well, here are the key points, really. The big one for you would be to optimize your limited and new resources that we now have available in this new normal world we all work in. Sometimes we have heard a lot from our clients, budgets have been cut in some functions, which really means you've got to do more with what you still have, so you can maximize the ROI with your existing tools, resources, and so forth. But we also want to introduce you to some of these new resources that have actually presented themselves now in this new normal environment that you can instantly leverage as well. And then, of course, we will go into how you can most benefit from anticipating those threats and opportunities, which then means you have more lead time if you can anticipate them early before your competition to formulate appropriate offensive or defensive counter strategies to your competitors' next moves. That's really the big objectives when you implement a WS system, an early warning system. It buys you lead time to then act offensively or defensively. And then lastly, as I said earlier, we want to give you some really hands-on tools and tactiques to elevate your personal profile when implementing a EWS system in your company, how to present that to management, how to drive the agenda when you have regular sessions or get-togethers with senior managers, where you basically tell them, hey, we want to challenge your assumptions, we want to keep you awake at night, or look at new hypotheses in what we should be worried about or where we should actually make our strategic moves. Could be an M&A opportunity that presents itself. We go into all that. a bit later. So having said that, well, I don't go into too much detail here. Well, Georgina already told you a lot about us, but I came out of a highly unorthodox background. I was in an investment bank in the West Coast. And that's when all we did back there was early anticipation, but for different purposes. The goal was to get early signals, non-Wall Street sources, to then make the right buy, hold, sell decisions. And that gave me the idea back in '92 to launch what's today now called Innovis. We had a different name, by the way, little detour here. We were called ISIS, Integrated Strategic Information Services. And as you may recall, ISIS hasn't been a very popular name a few years ago and even now, which forced us to do a major rebranding because clients got a bit nervous when they had to introduce us in virtual or actual face-to-face meetings as, here is our partner ISIS, and people took cover right away and said, oh no, not those guys. So now we are called Innovis, which definitely goes down much, much, much more better. No negative perceptions, hopefully. But here is a summary slide in terms of who we are and what we do. You see the 3 buckets here that we specialize in. IT is a big one, naturally, and life science. And where those two converge is digital health. So we really became very specialized. I never believed in the generalist model, where you are going to be good in everything, which is simply not possible in our line of work. So we decided early on to be very strategic and focus on one cyclical industry, which is obviously IT, which peaks and valleys, and the one that's life insurance, which is life science, pharma, generics, biosimilars, med devices, and so forth. And here we see some typical CI activities that we have specialized in over the years. And we will go, in many of these, but mainly in early warning systems, tracking and analysis, and early warning systems. But as I said, the analogy to how we got started really applies to you as well, because when we were in this investment bank, we were measured weekly in terms of our effectiveness, how accurate intelligence was by guiding the more quantitative portfolio managers in hopefully doing the right buy, hold, sell decisions of small caps, mid caps, large caps. So it was very brutal. The pressure was always on to be first to anticipate, first to communicate. And that same challenge now you have as well as product marketers and even more so as CI professionals to provide value and then hopefully have these high impact early warning red flags to management, what they ought to consider or where they should allocate resources, R&D resources, field resources, and product development resources. So the analogy is valid to this day. So let's talk about the big picture in this environment that we are playing in. As we all know, the landscape is extremely dynamic and has become more complex by the day, literally. Traditional industry models have pretty much all of these been in flux over the past few years. So we had to adjust rapidly to stay market leaders or at least catch up quickly if you missed opportunities. Of course, COVID adds a whole ton of new uncertainties. It disrupts practically everything, how we go to market, how we sell, because sales reps no longer have relationship marketing opportunities by building face-to-face relationships. It's all virtual. So you got to find new ways in terms of how you get to prospects, how you uncover hot button issues, and then how you address them, right? It's all virtual. And of course, supply chains have been disrupted, which may delay time to market. It may delay a whole bunch of issues that are brand new to many of us as marketers. So this has put a lot of pressure on us decision makers. Many of us hopefully no longer feel in very unfamiliar territories. But it also, if you look at the glass as always being half full, it presents itself with a ton of new opportunities. How you can capture market share, how you can retain customers, and so forth, if you're quick to recognize these early opportunities and mitigate the risk that comes from your competitors at the same time. Of course, the rate of disruption has just increased all the more now, as we know, across various industries. So bottom line is simply in terms of competitive intelligence, we need to know much more than our competitors. We need to know that sooner than them. So we got to be faster in leveraging and capitalizing on opportunities and threats that present themselves over time. And the intelligence, the quality of it simply has to be better. So when we build scenarios, best case, worst case, or realistic case scenarios, the quality of those, they have to be superior to the ones that our competitors are building. So that's really the challenges that we face. So let's look at the kind of the sandbox that we all play in as product marketers, as CI professionals. So in the middle is your company. Around it, as you all know, we have Porter's 5 forces, the microeconomic factors, of which naturally we will focus mainly now on those, on the competitors. But any of these other ones can be part of an early warning system as well, because you can get good intelligence from, let's say, value chain partners, from suppliers, from early adapters, from innovators, and so forth. So we go into all of that. Then we have our macroeconomic factors, which of course have been in flux as well since COVID has shown up on the scene. And then around all of these, you have, of course, mega trends, which makes it more challenging because all of these individual pieces are in constant motion. So to keep it even more exciting, what it means is that each of these pieces, they impact each other. So not only are they in motion, they also impact each other. It's a highly complex environment, as we all know, more than ever. Disruption has increased. So macro versus macro, you have micro versus micro trends, you have micro versus macro. And then you have on top of all this mega trends that impact us all or impact any of these other elements. So what does this all mean? Before I go further, I want to ask you though, and ideally we hear from different industries, how we could apply some of this information to your world, to your industries. It would be interesting just if you want to reply in the chat function, perhaps just very shortly in terms of how do you see when you look at this chart, how does this apply to your world? I mean, where do you see factors that impact your company, your industry the most? Is it more the macro? Is it more the micro factors, I would imagine, of course? Or is it even the big picture, some of those mega trends that have an impact in how you have gone to market over the years? Has it changed or negatively or positively? So feel free to just answer some of these, and then Georgina will let us know what comes in, since I don't have visibility to the chat function. But it really makes it interesting for us from an early warning system point of view, how we want to look and monitor these elements in different ways that we will now go into. So the sooner you know what's on the horizon, the more lead time you have to either become the innovator, the early kind of innovator adapter, really, to set the trend, to set the stage where your competitors then are forced to catch up with you. Or if you miss those trends, you may be the one who is on the right side of the curve, where you have to play catch up, which is very expensive, as you know. So ideally, you become the early detector of trends and of opportunities or risks that you can then mitigate.
So right now, Mark, in the chat, the prevailing theme is everything, all of it.
Everyone, all of it.
All of it is going to affect it. We have one that says all of it, but new entrants and technologies specifically. And then we've also got somebody that is looking at how these big trends are affecting the micro and using that to look for expansion opportunities.
Oh, that's a good one. Exactly. Expansion opportunities makes very much sense based from a macro analysis, because yes, that's a very good point, because it can actually present not foreseeable opportunities, or management may not have even thought that far that some macro trends may open new doors, let's say, through acquisitions, to do rather than organically growing the business, go through an acquisition binge to then enter new markets that will grow faster than your traditional ones. That's a very good point.
Yeah. We're also looking at the micro versus the macro, right? As well as someone else is saying competitors and legislation in the medical device industry. We've got folks talking about that as well. And then we have people looking in energy automation. That's definitely macro. And then industrial automation is more micro. That's what folks are chatting about in here right now.
Oh, these are excellent examples to visualize and to illustrate. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing those. Yeah, it brings this chart to life, and we hear those real life case studies. And again, keeping a radar on these many factors is more art than science, since they're changing constantly. But there is a system to the madness, believe me, that we will go into a bit later. So I just move on since there is so much. But Georgina, if something else pops in that you want to mention, I mean, jump in anytime, of course, right? Because it's interesting information to hear from the audience. So one way to illustrate how the pace of change has been accelerating over the years and how the rate of disruption keeps on growing is by looking at the traditional curve. So on the horizontal curve, you have the time scale. And on the vertical one, you have the impact of detecting early changes on your company. So when we are at the early stages, basically here to the left in the time scale, that's where you may see early signals, early red flags that something may be brewing. There may be an embryonic threat that's lurking out in the distance, but you don't yet have enough intelligence to then provide a high degree of confidence to even build scenarios. But at least it's something that you can start to track and monitor when you build an early warning system. So this, as more to the left that you are on this time scale, the more you are in the comfortable position to proactively drive the issue. You may be the innovator by finding out an early trend at, let's say, at the consumer level, at the patient level in healthcare. It could be at the IT end user level, things that may be having a potential to be automated, let's say, routine processes, as a simple example. That could be automated in the cloud, or that could be done in a SaaS model more efficiently, what have you. But as long as you are the one who is early, you are the one driving the issue. If you are not detecting this early, as we see now on the right here, the problem is you will have to react to the issue. So clearly you want to be the driver of a new trend and not the one having to play catch up, because not only is it expensive, but it also impacts how you're being viewed by your current customers as not being an industry visionary or leader, but rather someone have to play catch up. So now, however, with the accelerated trend towards faster innovation and go-to-market strategies with more efficient market models or go-to-market models, we are moving this whole curve more to the left. So the impact, time to impact has increased tremendously, which increases the pressure on both CI professionals, but also product marketers to be able to anticipate earlier even upcoming risks that you can then mitigate through various strategies or capitalize on opportunities that present themselves. So it's really the new inflection point. And when I say inflection point, that's really the point where the future meets the present. That's really all it is. So you have only as much time that's on to the left of this inflection point for you to get ready to prepare for the inevitable new trend or new solution or new lifestyle that you want to really capitalize. You want to maximize the time on the left of the inflection point. That's a way to illustrate it in this chart. As you see here on the lower left, it's another way of describing it. So that's just a simplistic fashion of illustrating the importance of trying to be first to market or first to detect a trend or an opportunity or a risk factor. Not sure where that C came from. So really the bottom line here is to proactively position for success with this early warning system. And the goal really is to be early in this dynamic competitive landscape that we looked at earlier, relative to your competitors. And the goal is to gain or expand your market share either in existing markets or by even entering new markets by having detected these new opportunities earlier than the competition. And it also increases your margins simply because if you're first to market, you have the luxury of protection. Of course, in the healthcare, in the pharma space, you have the luxury of orphan drug status, where you have, I think, 7-year protection, patent protection. No generic player can come in. So after 7 years, you're up to competition, but that's a luxurious time scale compared to the IT industry, which is the other extreme, where your lead position, if you're lucky, may last perhaps 6 months, and then you have competitors coming in if it's a highly lucrative, high margin product or solution. So that it all depends, of course, on the dynamics in your industry as well. And in the industries, I think pharma and IT, that's about as diverse as they come, or as different as they come in that regard. And of course, by moving early, you do reduce the uncertainty because you have a capability with an early warning system to build scenarios. You can have management vote on likely outcomes. So everybody is aligned in terms of a timeline that's realistic when this opportunity may materialize and what has to be done to leverage this opportunity. But it also addresses emerging threats. So if you realize, whoops, we have a new competitor out there that's working on a really hot brand new game changer, we may want to consider do some due diligence on those guys while they're still privately held, so we can perhaps acquire them. That's often the case in the IT space. And it could also be the case in the pharma space when a university develops a highly promising compound. You want to make sure you contact the technology transfer officer to be first to have an in-licensing opportunity with an early stage promising compound, let's say immuno-oncology right now is all the rage. So that's a classic example that we see repeat itself a lot. And in the IT space, cloud infrastructure, SaaS models, what have you, too, big IT companies may be too slow to develop that in the hyper growth, hyper competitive IT space. So they may want to acquire a nimble, privately held small startup while they're still inexpensive. And of course, here, the last bullet point, advantage of emerging opportunities. That's pretty much all this, really. Of course, when it comes to early warning systems, if you look at the chart below, we all know what that is, right? When you drive around, first thing you do is go to Google Maps to make sure you avoid crowded streets or intersections of freeways. So that's a classic early warning system. Another one you all know from the Weather Channel and other channels is detecting nasty weather so we can prepare accordingly, like that snowstorm hitting the East Coast right now. You saw that thing coming, so that's a risk that was foreseeable. It was giving you enough lead time so you could make offensive, or rather in this case, defensive countermeasures to minimize the impact of that particular risk of this threat. So there are many others, and let me pose the question now back to you, the audience. Can you think of any other common early warning systems, either in your day-to-day life or in your business environment, that you have come across that you are either utilizing regularly or that you actually would like to have developed? Because I think there are plenty of other opportunities where you could develop an early warning system to mitigate risk and to minimize the impact. Of course, the obvious one is COVID. We all know that one, right? Some people say, hey, we saw that thing coming from China. We didn't do anything about it. Others may say, no, this one hit us with cold feet because we just did not know how fast and how rapid and how geographically widespread this thing is going to go. So the debate is open whether this is a stochastic risk. We go into that, different types of risks, whether it was foreseeable and actionable, or whether it was more like an earthquake, something that you cannot really prepare for and you simply don't know when it happens. The debate is open on this front too. Others say it's like a hurricane. We saw it coming. We had enough lead time to prepare for it. While other people think, no, COVID was like more a tornado that hits us and we had no contingencies in place. So, but let's not even go into that. That's a whole other 1 hour presentation, COVID. But can you think of any other early warning systems for now?
Yeah, there's some good ones in the chat, Mark. Really good examples of how we have this in our daily lives. So crash detection systems in people's cars, home carbon monoxide detectors, airlines with flight delays, even just the little meeting reminder that comes up in your Outlook and lets you know that in 15 minutes you have to be somewhere. Even just this week, my car told me that it's just about time for an oil change. So a lot of places that we find this in our kind of day-to-day life. But folks are also sharing ways that they use this in business. So customer interviews are a way that those kind of early detections come in. And so thinking about how we can translate what we're already familiar with in our regular life to the business world as well.
Great, excellent examples. I agree. And those the meeting reminders, oh boy, that can be nasty when you are in a different time zone and forgot, oh shoot, I was supposed to be there. We all know that situation probably. That's true. And another one I think is like avalanches. You know they could occur. So you build these massive avalanche protection walls in the Rockies, let's say, or the Sierra Nevada. You just don't know when it happens, but at least if it happens, you have a contingency plan in place, right? So it's like a risk mitigation that is, it's maybe a bit investment up front, but the opportunity cost of not doing it is huge. And the same is true in business, that you realize there is a certain downside, let's say, if a certain scenario materializes. So we may be better off investing it today, maybe expensive and painful, but the opportunity cost of not doing anything about this is way too big. So the analogy.
One other really interesting one here I want to make sure that you hear, Mark, is customers asking for price reductions.
That's a really good one too. Especially, again, COVID related, right? You have a good example is fitness membership clubs. People come in and say, hey, I want to have a reimbursement of my membership because obviously with COVID, I'm not allowed to go to my gym and I want my money back. So that's a risk nobody saw coming. And it could even make many of these smaller companies, not just in fitness area, but in many other areas, restaurants even, go broke because it was a risk they could not anticipate. Nobody could anticipate the implications a pandemic has, since we never experienced it in our generations. So that's a very good example as well, I agree. Because the opportunity cost of losing a customer permanently versus giving them a temporary discount, it's a trade-off. It depends on the industry, of course, whether there is a lot of substitution products or suppliers, but it also depends on the customer retention strategy that your company has in place. How important is it? How valuable is this client? Is there a lot of repeat business that you will be losing once you get back to an old normal, let's call it? So long-term thinking and planning I think is mission critical in those scenarios. Yes, very much so. So the big question really is, now we almost get philosophical here, right? Is the future something that we can create, which is the ideal case scenario, that you are the driver, the innovator, or even the inventor of a new way of living life, of making our lives easier, of having a more efficient technology out there for certain processes, or a novel immuno-oncology drug, let's say? Or is it something that happens to us, right? That you simply cannot see this thing coming. Again, COVID presents itself as a good example, but so do earthquakes that you simply cannot predict to this day and age, at least not accurately, or even tsunamis, as we saw in Japan. I mean, there you have a teeny weeny bit of lead time. You see that thing coming, but you have to be extremely fast to avoid horrible damage. So that's really the big questions, those two. So then what are the options really in general when we want to deal with the future? To what extent are we able to build scenarios? And really there are just 5 ways how we can deal with any future event. You can avoid it. That's one way to go. And if the opportunity cost is minimal for you to avoid it, well, then perhaps that's one good course of action that you can easily rationalize and convince management to pursue if you have enough substantiating detail and evidence that avoidance is better than attacking it full force. Another one is to interdict it. I mean, that's clearly one more aggressive way to deal with change, to deal with a disruption that's coming your way. One other one would be to mitigate the risks. That's the cautious way to go about it, which is done a lot, risk mitigation strategies. It's unavoidable, but at least you have a plan in place to mitigate it. You may simply want to accept it. I mean, not much you can do about it, right? So you simply have to then quickly put together some contingency plans, inform suppliers, the value chain, and other partners that you may have, strategic partners, what this means, the new environment, the new normal, since you have to accept it. But the best of them all, of course, as we talked about earlier, is this one. If you are able to drive the future, if you are able to, through an early warning system, kind of predict through different scenarios what's most likely versus least likely to happen, and then what its impact will be of each of these scenarios, clearly that puts you in the most luxurious position of driving the future. If you of course realize it's something that your current core competencies in your company can address, then driving the future presents itself as a tremendous opportunity. If you realize, whoa, this upcoming mega change, we are simply not well positioned in our current makeup, and changing ourselves or adjusting to this unavoidable future is too costly, then you may just want to avoid it altogether. Or you may want to just say, accept it, and let's start planning now by putting together some contingency funds to deal with the damage. But of course, if you can drive it, wow, that's the best position you can be in. And that's for our business life, but I think the same pertains in our personal lives as well. If you look at those 5 options, driving it is the best of them all. Now, a way to systematically tackle these challenges is by having a system in place that allows you, first of all, to look at these competitive landscape environments by doing classic market research in-house, some competitive deep dives on your core and emerging competitors, detect strengths and weaknesses they have, which then leads to an anticipation of competitors' moves, which really means you are going into scenario analysis. You're building your scenarios, a baseline scenario where most people agree this is most likely going to happen. And typically we can assign it a probability of occurrence beyond 50%. That becomes your base case. And then anything that's lower than a 50% likelihood of occurrence becomes your upside or your downside to the base case. So scenarios 1 through 3 may all be your base case scenarios, but then each of those has an upside or a downside risk factor associated with it. So as I said earlier, there is indeed a system to the madness in that you have to constantly update those scenarios. And the way you do that is by identifying specific signals, or you can call them red flags, associated with each scenario. So once you start this systematic early warning system, it really allows you to keep an open mind and to keep looking for these red flags to come up, either through a syndicated, secondary, publicly available information that you always need to monitor anyhow, but more importantly, find out through human primary intelligence sources when such signals suddenly pop up. And if they do, you also know to which scenario they pertain, which is the beauty of that system. You then instantly know, aha, if I get 3 red flags, signal 3 red flags, let's say, that means scenario 3 is likely going to happen first. And you may then reprioritize your base case scenarios again. So this whole thing here is very dynamic. And that's the key, really. You monitor these signals ongoingly, and then you update your competitive landscape accordingly, and you also update your associated scenarios. That's in a very simple way, showing you how an early warning system works. And of course, everything has to be actionable these days now. So once you've done that, successful product marketing and CI teams together, they call senior management to the table quarterly, let's say. It's done oftentimes quarterly in bigger IT and pharma companies. And they present exactly those things. They present the scenarios, they present the so what implications, what it means. And they also present the now what, the action plans. What should we do now? And they assign specific responsibilities, deadlines before our next meeting. These teams are responsible for such and such measures. So it's a very interactive and very dynamic sort of exercise, having an early warning system in place. So the next section talks more now about specific tools and processes, how you go about getting to this intelligence, right, for early warning systems. So starting with the information spectrum, you all know this type of information that you all have in your companies. Of course, you do a lot of the statistics, you do a lot of classic market research, quantitative market research, which results in forecasts, projections, survey work, estimates, and so forth, things that are quantifiable based on historical information. And I say it's historical information, it's not yet intelligence, because it's based on either publicly available information, which you do need, of course, for intelligence decision-making, But the problem is your competitors have access to that same public information as well. So your competitive edge is basically zero. The trick is to go well beyond this hard data and enrich it with the soft information. OSINT, by the way, that's the Open System Intelligence Sources, OS. Again, publicly available, syndicated type, subscription-based research, which you do need as a foundation. But the real magic bullet points in terms of fresh intelligence is really soft intel. Things like opinions, conjecture, inference, observations, complaints, rumors, and so forth. That's human intelligence. That's information that's not published anywhere, and therefore its value is that much greater. Again, I make the analogy to our roots in the investment world, that we went to non-Wall Street sources that Wall Street analysts simply don't talk to. And these human intelligence sources have had insights that clearly gave us indications that change is coming, that the trend is changing, or a new trend is about to be launched. And once this information, once this intelligence becomes information in the public domain, your competitive edge is basically gone. So again, the goal is to be as much to the left of the curve we looked at earlier as possible. And one of the best ways to get there is by focusing on exactly that, soft intelligence based on human intelligence, human sources. So, and then another question, of course, now for discussion is, from these sources that are listed here, or even other ones that are not listed here, because that's not an all-inclusive list, which ones are you using, or which ones do you find at the moment most valuable for you in terms when you're looking for detecting potential new markets, perhaps, or new ways to go to market, or detecting prospects' pain points? What do you rely on the most at the moment? And would you like to be able to get more fresh human intelligence insights, not just from customers and prospects, but your strategic alliance partners, the value chain, let's say, the distribution partners? Could be R&D partners, could be go-to-market partners. It's the whole gamut, really, when we look back at the competitive landscapes. Anyone is fair game.
Yeah. One thing I'll share while people are thinking and typing out their answers for you, Mark, is something that was shared in the Pragmatic alumni community in the pack. A really good source of kind of that soft intel is job descriptions of your competitors. What are they hiring for? Are they looking for people in particular industries or with different skill sets? And it will give an indication of the products that they're looking to roll out in the markets they're moving into.
That's a brilliant one. You're very much so LinkedIn to the rescue, right, on that one. Because sometimes people give way too much information about their jobs, their current jobs, their previous jobs. And it's a great source of intelligence. Yes, very much so. That's a very good one, job descriptions.
Yeah. In the chat, we're also hearing customer complaints, industry news, as well as customer community trends and support tickets. Kind of listening to the customer reviews, so kind of listening to the trends, really good market research there, kind of some of the classic spots.
Great, very great examples. Yes, support tickets, that brings up some fond memories, because we hear a lot when we do these studies for IT clients. For instance, over-promised TCO, total cost of ownership. Suddenly these hidden costs are popping up, right, after a brilliant sales pitch by your competitor's reps, and you may have lost the deal. And then, 6 months later, the clients complain that, there are all these hidden costs that were not disclosed in the pitch or in the value proposition. That's a classic. Yeah, support tickets are amazing in the IT space. Very good point. Yeah.
Also, got some in here, some win-loss information. So really being tightly aligned with the sales team to get their feedback about why they won deals and why they lost deals. Also looking at some of the thought leadership work, talks or webinars that are given by your customers and what they're focused on, looking at that space as well.
Fantastic. It's great that you mentioned those, because these are our next 2 slides. Wow. good match, because you could launch these voice of the customer initiatives to learn so much about them. Not only customers, but even prospects or your competitors' customers or reference accounts of your competitors, that will tell you so much about pain points, their unhappiness with existing legacy systems or solutions. And again, items that are not published anywhere. You can really only get to those by having in-depth peer-to-peer expert discussions in win-loss scenarios or voice of the customer scenarios. So these are excellent examples as well. I agree. And you can do the same even with partners, because let's say you have in the IT space a big distributor. They have a kind of unbiased feedback because they represent numerous vendors and they know different customer segments. So when they tell you something, it has weight because they have very objective, unbiased insights and give you feedback that can be tremendously useful when you modify your sales motion, go-to-market, value propositions, and so forth. Yeah. Very good examples. So really here we are looking a bit more into the tools for your EWS toolbox, right? So we talked about foundational data sources in the public domain. I mean, everybody needs those as a foundation. Then, of course, you can cover early warning, the earning calls. That's a must. That's an easy one to do. Investor days, webcasts, with focus on the Q&A portions, and you throw in your own Q&A, of course, that's even better. Then you get your real-time news feeds and alerts on your target and core competitors and your key customers, I should add as well. Then, of course, the gold mine for intelligence, once you're back to a somewhat more normal world, are conferences, industry events, trade shows, because people go to those with a information sharing mode already. So you don't have to break the ice and build a rapport with these sources. They're willing to talk. And you can go to the booth, do some booth intelligence. You can talk to their customers, your competitors, partners. So conferences are amazing. And even in virtual events, now that we've done a lot of those this year, people are very willing to exchange opinions. You can launch a private chat function and then have a round table with sources you want to pick their brains or get their opinions on something. And typically, after a virtual conference interaction, you can then schedule separate one-on-one expert discussions over the phone with those sources, with those key opinion leaders or other relevant people or sources. And the last one here would be in-house primary, of course, voice of the customer, win-loss monitoring is a big one, but also pre-sales intelligence programs so that your sales reps are fully equipped before pitching a new deal or a new account with pain points. What bothers them? What are their legacy systems? What are their budget frames? What are decisions? How are they made? Who are the influencers, the decision makers, the ones who hold the purse strings? So the more they know going in, the more likely it is that they close the deal and shorten the sales cycle. Really, that's the essence there. But the more valuable ones, as we talked about, are non-public primary sources, where you basically develop your own network of informants, which is really the most valuable. So if you have your own network of proprietary informants, both within your company, so you may have good contacts that you can cultivate in R&D, in sales, with sales reps, of course, you are marketers yourself, but you would also have other relevant internal stakeholder connection points that become your informants by you cultivating a give and take relationship. So you share information with them that you know is of value to them and vice versa. And you do the same, of course, with external sources, right, as well, even more importantly. So it's all about kind of cultivating, like a journalist, a give and take relationship so that people are willing to give you these early golden nuggets of intelligence before they become public knowledge. That's always the goal, to be first, to anticipate. So here is just a very brief summary again in terms of the soft sourcing, what it means, and who of these sources are relevant to you. Of course, depends on your industry, right? But let's say partners, customers, service providers in the IT space, employees, industry experts, and then these are some sample topics. So the more the merrier of these sources. Puts you in an advantageous position if you have a lot of these proprietary sources in your own personal network.
Hey, Mark, you'll have to You'll have to forgive me for rushing you along, but I'm keeping an eye on the time. We've got about 10 minutes before folks will be otherwise engaged, and I know what great stuff you have in that framework section and some of the how-tos you have planned. So
Yeah.
quick time heads up for you.
Great, thank you so much. I rushed it on. My Swiss time. Oops, now I give away my roots. But yeah, I go for it. Swiss timing. So here we go. Primary sources. Very quick, just some examples. Some of these sources, who they may be, who you may want to cultivate, and what kinds of intelligence they may be able to give you. And this example comes from the IT space, as you can tell from the terminology. But all of this stuff is extremely useful. And we don't go into grand detail because I mentioned it earlier, but that's one of these initiatives that you can leverage. Voice of the customer initiatives, where customers tell you very early what bugs them, why they would switch to you from their current vendor. Or if they're already your customers, then you could get intelligence about risk mitigation strategies you can implement if they're likely to switch or they're not happy about something, perhaps your technology vision. Could be a range of things, but the bottom line is that you can position yourself as a VOC initiative as their trusted partner to anticipate change and then be their chosen consultant to mitigate that change, that risk that they face. And then we talked about, some of you mentioned the win-loss. Yes, that's one of the key programs really to focus on, because it's a goldmine of intelligence that you can be getting if you do it regularly in particular. So longitudinally, you can then compare an evolution of an issue and optimize your go-to-market, optimize your shorten the sales cycle and the retention rates of existing accounts and so forth. Again, just here are some of these signals we mentioned earlier. Talent acquisition was mentioned by one of you. So E means time, -3. Again, here is the event where future meets present. That's this inflection point. The further you are to the left, the better it is. The further you are to the left, the more possibilities you will, of course, initially detect, because the future is still very blurry. But as time goes on, the blurry line becomes less, and your options, your possibilities of what the future will look like will decrease, while your confidence level will increase for each of the scenarios that you then design. So that's, I'll be quick on that one because we talked about it already a little bit. Framework. So a good EWS system really wants to give you information, puts you in the know sooner than you should be, that your competitors know. So you want to be ahead of the curves, which is a function of the maturity of the change. So the more you are to the left, the better of this curve. You want to know about this well ahead of your competition. And of course, the quality of these scenarios have to be better than the ones your competitors will be building on. That's really the bottom line of a good EWS program, that you're able to anticipate the evolution of the competitive landscape well before your competitors. So we talked about classification of risks, which you really have to do to then tackle each risk accordingly, right? So you have actionability, which really is the question about whether or not you can do anything about the risk at all, as predictability on the horizontal, which really means whether or not you're in a position to tell whether something will actually happen. So stochastic risks are the most nasty of them all, because think earthquakes. You cannot predict them. There is really not much you can do about them. And those are the kinds of risks, you know, that are the worst. And again, some people may say COVID may have been one of these, but that's debatable. Acceptance risks, think hurricanes. You see those things coming, but there is only so much you can do about it, like boarding up your shop windows and so forth. Contingency risks, think tornadoes or avalanches. You can do something about them, you just don't know when it's going to happen. But the ones that are most interesting are strategic risks, where you can actually anticipate and plan to mitigate or leverage an opportunity. I don't spend too much time on this one, but really high-level key intelligence questions that you may want to include in an EWS program. Here are some of those. They're kind of self-explanatory, so I don't spend too much time on this slide, because we mentioned some of these points already. And then always the last point, counteractions and actions. So really, the focus of prioritizations is you can place and plot different risks in different perspectives. If it's a sunrise, it's something that's clearly visible, you can plan for it, it's predictable, it's actionable. Or if the worst case would be an asteroid impact type of risk, it just happens to you. You've got to deal with it once it's there. And here we see some of those bullets, what some of these risks or opportunities may look like, and what you want to track in an EWS program, right? It could be dilutive to your value proposition, to your competitive advantage, and so forth. It's a very simple way of categorizing risks. And here is really the step-by-step process in how you go about it. So as we said, you first track the signals that you have identified to look at opportunities and threats. You then, step 2, define about 2 or 3 baseline scenarios where everybody has to agree that the probability of occurrence is greater than 50%, and you have to monitor those basically regularly. For each base case, there are upsides and downsides. Those are the probabilities of fewer than 50% that you have to assign and monitor as well. And then for each of these, in step 4, you look at the impact they have on your sales. Is it probable to occur? Are these things predictable? Are they actionable? And so forth. So this classification scheme of risks and opportunities is ongoing and ever-changing. And then when you are calling these cross-functional teams with management, you also assign votes. You have to vote on these scenarios so that everybody is aligned in terms of next steps and what challenges, opportunities, or risks you should focus on. And step 6, most importantly, it's actionable. You're assigning specific responsibilities and deadlines for the next steps and the next executive meeting. So in a nutshell, that's how these EWS programs typically work. We have some goodies on our website. You can download some worksheets that you can put to use right away. This one as well, it gives you a way of classification, different opportunities, different risks. Is it high or low impact to your industry, to your company, the type of risk that we talked about, and which landscape segments are impacted by it. So this gives you at least a good start in terms of classification schemes to get started right away. Same here, it's downloadable that you can use right away. Likely futures based on the analysis from your EWS program, and then likely possible courses of action. So it's very bottom line, actionable intelligence and focus. So really bottom line here is faster time to insights and execution. That's what an EWS program does. And the good thing is it's measurable. So when management wants to have hard ROI metrics to justify implementation of such a program, a monitoring program, there are tested and proven ways of quantifying the outcome. So one would be measuring sales cycles. If they have gotten shortened, well, that's a win. That's a justification for a program like that. And it could also be hand in hand with a win-loss program, by the way. So it doesn't have to be a standalone. It can be hand in hand with voice of the customer, win-loss, or pre-sales intelligence as well. It may increase retention rates, which is also measurable and quantifiable. You can do opportunity cost calculations. So what if you wouldn't have known this piece of intelligence or this scenario 6 months from today? What would we have lost in terms of opportunity of revenues? Or what could we have saved in terms of costs? Accuracy, yes, that's an easy one. How many wins did you have? How many misses? How many hits? And the net effect of such a program typically are those 4 points that you see here. Management is convinced that there is value to it, indeed. So it's all about quantification of ROI. And to have the greatest impact of these programs, it's really all about communication, right? When it starts with a definition of the cadence, who has to know how much and by when and how often, really, that's the bottom line. And you can buy life insurance, so to speak, make sure that whenever you communicate something, you add degrees of confidence by saying, okay, at this point, this is only a rumor, but we put it on our radar because it's clearly something that will impact our business. But we give it a degree of low confidence because it's only 1 or 2 sources that told us that. So at least you are the first to know, first to anticipate when you communicate that to management. Regular executive reviews would be critical, that you are putting together, you draft the agenda. And we see that a lot in our Fortune 100 clientele. Those product marketers and CI teams, when they do that together or as single teams, their impact on management and their associated visibility for the functions grows tremendously, because management is even looking forward to these quarterly sessions, because you challenge them, you kind of tell them what should keep them awake at night by giving up these, by telling them these scenarios and the likely associated impacts and outcomes. So this is really strategic level information. And you tailor the delivery to different stakeholders in your company, of course, as well. So, and then based on their feedback, you can modify the EWS accordingly. And it's clearly mission critical to have an executive champion for any of these EW programs. That's key, that people see the value from the top down. Really the key takeaway, what is it? The bottom line of a good EWS program is that it gives you sufficient lead time to then develop offensive or defensive countermeasures for an upcoming risk or leverage a upcoming opportunity. That's really the bottom line in all of this. And if you can do this systematically and regularly, I think your functions are in for longevity and more funding over time, because you really prove value, which is more important than ever now in our new, more normal virtual world, that you really got to demonstrate value in any which way you can. And at the EWS program, next to win-loss, next to voice of the customer, and next to pre-sales intelligence, those four together are, but in our experience, top-notch at the moment and in hot demand. So I think we just barely made it, didn't we? Timing-wise.
We're eking in right past the finish line here. And so I think that folks are going to have to drop now. I'm sure everyone has a busy schedule like us as they prepare for the holidays. So if you have questions for Mark that we didn't get an opportunity to answer, you can always reach us. You can connect with Mark through Innovis. You can find him on LinkedIn. You can also come into the Pragmatic alumni community, where we'll make sure Mark is available to answer some of your questions as well. And so with that, our last conversation of the year was a really awesome one. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. This was a ton of fun. I learned an incredible amount. For everybody on the call, thanks so much for being here. Very happy holidays, and we will make sure you all get a link to the recording of the conversation so you can go back and continue to digest all this great info.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. And thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting.
Bye, everyone.